You've survived your 20s. You've made it through the chaos, the experimentation, the loud rooms, the fake friendships, and the days where you mistook noise for purpose. Now, you're older. You're quieter. You don't chase the same things. But something else has taken their place. A kind of silence that doesn't bring peace. A space inside of you that doesn't echo back anymore. A hollow weight you feel not because you're broken, but because something is missing. Not dramatically missing. Not stolen or destroyed. Just absent. A dull ache. Not from pain, but from the awareness that what used to be enough is no longer fulfilling. And you wonder, why do I feel like I'm floating through my life? Why do I feel like I'm here, but not really? Why does every room feel slightly colder than it used to, even when I'm surrounded by people? Why is it that, after everything I've built, I feel more disconnected than ever? This is the truth no one tells you about life after 30. You don't wake up with all the answers. You don't magically find yourself. You don't feel grown up. You just feel more than ever. And sometimes what you feel is a silent emptiness that creeps in between meetings, in the drive home, in the middle of the night when your heart beats just loud enough to remind you that you're still alive, but not fully living. It's not depression. It's not failure. It's the quiet realization that the life you've built may not be the one you truly needed, and that hurts in a language that doesn't use words. Because here's what no one taught you. You can have a good job, a stable relationship, a calendar full of plans, and still feel utterly empty. That emptiness isn't your enemy. It's your signal, a spiritual knock on the door you've been afraid to open, not because you don't want to change, but because you don't even know what you're supposed to want anymore. Your 30s are not the crisis. They're the clearing, the wide open field where everything you once believed is brought out into the light, questioned, and often let go. It's here where the people who once fit you like skin begin to feel like costumes, where goals you swore were sacred begin to crumble in your hands, where routines become cages and your own reflection becomes a stranger. And this isn't something to fix overnight. This is the process of waking up without the noise, of hearing yourself breathe in a room full of silence and asking, is this really it? The world taught you to perform, to chase, to achieve. It taught you how to look impressive, how to curate yourself, but it never taught you how to feel whole when the applause stops, how to sit in your own stillness without spiraling into self-doubt. You were programmed to climb, but never told what to do once you reached the top and felt nothing. You were told to find love, but not how to maintain it when the infatuation fades and real intimacy demands presence, vulnerability, and patience. You were told to work hard, but not how to rest without guilt. You were told to be strong, but not how to grieve the old versions of yourself that you now must bury. This is why you feel empty after 30, because everything you once ran on, external validation, adrenaline, attention, ambition, starts to expire, and you're left with just you, your real self, your silent self. And most people don't know what to do with that. So they numb, they scroll, they drink, they overwork, they cheat, they abandon, they buy things they don't need. They change cities, partners, jobs, but the silence follows. Because the silence is not a location, it's a mirror, and it will sit with you until you learn to stop running. What you're feeling isn't emptiness, it's unprocessed truth. It's the soul's whisper finally getting louder than the world's shouting. It's your body saying, I'm tired of pretending I'm okay. Can we be real now? The ache isn't your end, it's your opening. But the world doesn't celebrate these quiet awakenings. There are no medals for inner work, no trophies for nights spent crying alone trying to untangle your childhood wounds. No applause for walking away from toxic patterns. No headlines when you learn how to say no to what drains you. But that's where life begins, not in the noise. In the stillness, in the brave, trembling decision to listen to yourself, finally. This is not the part of your life where you're falling apart. It's the part where you're falling inward, where you are learning that emptiness is not the absence of life. It's the invitation to start living differently. No more autopilot, no more performing, no more trying to be everything to everyone. Now is the time to rebuild from truth. And truth, unlike noise, is quiet. It doesn't scream for attention. It waits patiently until you're ready. The hardest part about turning 30 isn't the age itself. It's the invisible pressure to have everything figured out. Suddenly, time feels faster. Conversations shift from dreams to responsibilities. Friendships become schedules. Romance becomes logistics. And your own desires? They get buried beneath what's expected of you. You're not lost. You've just been told that the map is more important than the journey. You followed the map. Go to school. Get a job. Find a partner. Buy the house. Check the boxes. Live a life that looks good. But somewhere along the way, no one stopped to ask, does it feel good? Because the world prioritizes optics. Success is a photo. Happiness is a highlight reel. Fulfillment is something you fake until it convinces everyone but yourself. And in this race to be seen, we've forgotten how to be felt. That emptiness you carry isn't because you're doing life wrong. It's because you're finally beginning to want something real. You no longer crave the loud admiration of people who don't know you. You want depth. You want peace. You want alignment. But depth doesn't come easy. To feel deeply, you must sit with your shadows. To find peace, you must confront what disrupts it. To align, you must deconstruct everything built on pretense. That's why life after 30 feels like a quiet war. Not against the world, but against your former self. The part of you that used to people please, that performed to be accepted, that chased success for validation, that smiled when it wanted to scream, that stayed when it wanted to leave, that said yes to things that drained its spirit. This part won't leave gently. It'll fight. It'll make you question your growth. It'll whisper, who do you think you are to change now? It'll remind you of the comfort of your cage. But remember, growth is grief. You are mourning the person you no longer want to be. And mourning is not a weakness. It's a sacred ritual, one that makes room for rebirth. You may not have the energy to be social like before. You may not enjoy the same places. You may prefer quiet over chaos, solitude over stimulation, intentionality over quantity. That's not regression. That's evolution. That's your soul recalibrating, not to the world's expectations, but to your own authenticity. You've outgrown versions of yourself that survived on crumbs. And now, you're learning how to bake your own bread. It's unfamiliar. It's uncomfortable. But it's yours. And that is everything. Let go of the idea that you should have it all together by now. Healing is not a straight line. Purpose is not a position. Fulfillment is not a formula. You are allowed to be a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time. You are allowed to pause, to retreat, to question everything and everyone. You are allowed to redesign your life at 30, 40, 50, or 60. Because the moment you become aware is the moment you begin again. Emptiness is just awareness without distraction. A blank page waiting to be rewritten. Not with someone else's story, but with your own. The question isn't, why do I feel this way? The question is, what is this emptiness trying to tell me? And if you sit in the silence long enough, you'll hear the answer. Not in words, but in a knowing, a nudge, a pull. A small but powerful voice whispering, this isn't the end. This is the return to yourself. Sometimes the emptiness you feel isn't about lacking something. It's about no longer tolerating what doesn't nourish you. It's a detox, a spiritual purge, a clearing of space where the artificial used to live. When you were younger, noise filled the void. But now, noise feels like poison. Now you crave depth, not distraction. Now you notice how draining small talk is. Now you see through performance. Now you feel the weight of your own intuition pressing against the walls of a life that feels too small. You don't want more. You want different. You want quieter mornings and real laughter. You want time to mean something again. You want presence to replace productivity. You want friendships that feel like home. You want love that doesn't require a mask. You want to breathe without pretending. And yet, you still feel stuck between two selves, the one who survived and the one who's ready to live. That's what your 30s are, the crossing, the undoing of borrowed dreams, the sifting of truth from tradition, the realization that success without peace is just performance in a gilded cage. No one tells you how lonely it can feel to wake up from the life you used to love, to admit to yourself that what once mattered deeply now barely moves you, to stand in a room full of people and realize you've outgrown the conversation, to scroll through your life and wonder where you went. This is where courage enters, not the loud kind, not the heroic kind, but the kind that sits in the dark with your fears and says, I see you, and I'm not running anymore. The courage to delete the things that numb you, the courage to disappoint those who benefited from your silence, the courage to rest when the world demands more, the courage to admit that your dreams have changed, and that you have too. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. You've spent so long proving your worth. Now it's time to feel it. You've spent so long seeking permission. Now it's time to give it to yourself. You've spent so long surviving in the noise. Now it's time to rise in the silence, because that silence is no longer empty. It's sacred. It's where the truth lives. It's where your power was hiding. Not in the spotlight, but in the stillness you once avoided. When you stop fearing the quiet, you start hearing who you really are. And maybe that's all healing is. Not becoming someone new, but remembering someone old. The you that existed before the world told you who to be. The you that laughed without fear, that cried without shame, that dreamed without limits, that loved without performance. That version of you isn't gone. She's just waiting. He's just watching. They're just underneath the layers of survival. And when you sit long enough in that silence, when you resist the urge to escape it, you meet them again. Not with fireworks, not with drama, but with a whisper. I've missed you. There is no map for this part of your life, no checklist, no certificate of arrival. Only the slow, patient process of unbecoming everything you were told to be, so you can finally remember who you were always meant to become. And that's why it feels so empty. Because the space between stories is always quiet. The space between identities is always dark. And darkness, though terrifying, is the most honest place you'll ever be. It doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't perform. It simply reflects. And in that reflection, you will see things that make you proud, and things that break your heart. You will remember choices that shaped you, words you spoke to survive, versions of yourself you abandoned for acceptance. And through all of it, you will begin to understand. The emptiness wasn't your fault. It was the silence before the truth arrived. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not less than. You are simply standing at the doorway of your most authentic self, and realizing that crossing the threshold requires shedding everything that isn't real. And that is hard. That is holy. That is healing. You don't need more advice. You don't need a 5-step plan. You don't need to consume more content or read more quotes. You need to feel, fully, finally, without numbing, minimizing, or editing it for someone else's comfort. Let the tears come. Let the confusion speak. Let the rage rise and the laughter return and the stillness settle into your bones like an old friend. This is not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. This is not regression. It's resurrection. The world will keep spinning. The noise will keep calling. But you get to choose now. You get to decide what matters. You get to redesign everything. And not for the sake of aesthetics, but for the sake of alignment, for the sake of joy, for the sake of finally feeling whole again. You will lose people on this path, not because you are wrong, but because your healing no longer fits their comfort. You will lose opportunities, not because you failed, but because your soul refused to betray itself again. And you will gain clarity, peace, depth, real love, self-trust, the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. You will begin to fall in love with mornings again, not because they're easy, but because you're no longer waking up with a mask. You will begin to speak slower, softer, not because you're unsure, but because you've learned that true power never shouts. You will begin to enjoy your own company, not because you're lonely, but because you're finally listening to the voice within you, the one that's been whispering all along. You were never lost, just buried. The emptiness isn't a punishment, it's an invitation to pause, to reflect, to stop living a life on autopilot and start designing a life on purpose. It's not here to shame you, it's here to awaken you. It's here to pull you away from the people who dim your light, from the jobs that drain your soul, from the habits that keep you asleep. It's here to remind you that presence is the most powerful form of prayer. So when you feel that ache in your chest, that heaviness in your bones, that fog in your thoughts, don't run. Sit with it. Ask it what it wants you to know. Ask it what part of you has been silent for too long. And then listen. Listen not with your ears, but with your whole being. Because sometimes the most life-changing answers come wrapped in stillness, not in sound. You were not meant to hustle through your healing. You were not meant to compress your humanity into digestible quotes. You were not meant to sacrifice your peace for productivity. You were meant to feel, to breathe, to rest, to create, to connect, deeply, genuinely, honestly. And that begins by honoring the very feeling you were taught to fear. Emptiness. Let it cleanse you. Let it teach you. Let it strip away the unnecessary. Let it guide you back to your center. And when you arrive there, at the quiet, sacred place within you, you'll find something you forgot you had, wholeness. Not because you gained more, but because you finally let go. Let go of timelines, of comparisons, of performance, of pretending. You were never too late. You were always just silent. You were never empty. You were always just full of truth waiting to be heard. You were never broken. You were becoming. And now you're ready, not to impress, not to compete, but to live, deliberately, quietly, powerfully. So tonight, as you fall asleep, let this silence hold you. Let this message remind you. Let this moment change you. And remember, you are not behind. You are not lost. You are simply returning home to yourself.